Over my more than 10 years of experience as a peer-reviewed academic researcher, I've had to read literally thousands of books. And today I'll share 5 powerful methods I've taught hundreds of students to not only read faster, but to remember and apply what they read. Each of these methods builds upon each other, so be sure not to skip any particular one. The first 3 methods on this list will help you read faster, and the last 2 are methods that will help you remember more of what you read. And the first of these 3 methods is to determine the needed information. All too often, I've observed students and also past colleagues of mine reading aimlessly. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with cuddling up with a good book simply for pleasure. But if our goal is to get through the information faster and retain more of it, we have to go into a book already knowing what kind of information we're looking for. Case in point, when I was writing my honors thesis on the history of the American prison system, I already knew the specific topic I wanted to write about. And although I couldn't be sure of what my exact argument would be, narrowing down to a very specific topic, in this case, the causes and effects of incarceration among poor white men in Virginia and Pennsylvania between 1820 to 1840, yes, being that specific, automatically helped me understand what kinds of sources and books I would have to read. But going even further than this, do you see how this could also help us identify exactly what information within those books we need to read? You see, not all information contained in the books we read is necessary for us to read. It all depends on our learning goal. What is the objective you're looking to achieve from your reading? And based on this goal, which paragraphs or even chapters do you need to read closely versus simply scanning over or even skipping completely? No, this isn't cheating or failing to do justice to the book. In fact, I'm a huge proponent of rereading books we've already read. As our goals change, the parts we read or emphasize in our minds will be different. So we can always fill in the gaps on our reread. But doesn't it make sense to prioritize reading what we need most at the moment we need it? Well, that now takes us to our second method, which is actually 2 methods that complement each other during the actual reading process. Now that you've determined the information you need to extract from the book, let's focus on ways to differentiate the essential information and the non-essential information and read them in the appropriate ways. And the 2 methods we'll use to accomplish this are called skimming and scanning. Now, if you'd like to see these methods in action, go ahead and pause this video, pick up a book you're reading, and see if you can start instantly improving your reading speed with what I'm about to teach you. Let's learn the skimming method first. In this method, we'll read the first and last lines of the introductory paragraph, then we'll read the first line of each body paragraph, and of course, if it's a super short sentence, feel free to read the first or last 2 sentences. And then for the concluding paragraph, we'll do the same thing we did with the introductory paragraph. We'll just read the first and last lines. Now, what does this achieve and why is it effective? Well, the main argument or thesis of a passage can typically, but not always, be found in the opening and closing statements of the introductory paragraph. Likewise, each first sentence of a body paragraph will usually contain the main points of that paragraph, and so on. Now, this doesn't mean we should just read the entire book like this. Now, that would be doing an injustice to the book. Instead, you're using this method to decide which parts to read more closely, again, guided by the information we've already identified we need, and which parts to use our complementary method, scanning, on. Scanning is essentially how it sounds. We scan our eyes through a particular paragraph or passage without reading full sentences or statements. Instead, what we're doing is something very crucial. We're looking for repeated themes. You see, in school, most of us learn that a main idea is something like the central theme or what the passage is mostly about. But whenever I've taught students who were preparing for college entrance exams, I always emphasize to them that these definitions are way too vague. Instead, what a main idea really is just words, phrases, and themes that get repeated the most. So then how does that help us read faster? Well, as you're scanning a passage, you want to laser focus your mind on finding and logging whatever words, phrases, or themes are getting repeated in that paragraph. Based on what you see gets repeated, you'll essentially know what that paragraph is discussing and consequently whether or not it fits the information needed that you've defined at the outset. And so now, as you can see, reading faster isn't simply a matter of reading every page as fast as you can. It's a matter of using skimming and scanning scanning strategically to know where to slow down and read word for word, where to read lightly so as to simply get the main idea, and where to skip altogether. But you'll still have a difficult time using these methods if you don't combine them with the next method on our list. Once again, every method I'm discussing here builds upon each other to produce a sort of secret formula for faster reading. So if you skip one of these methods, it might just be the reason you continue to struggle. So the next method again is really two methods that complement each other. And those are reduce subvocalization and use a tracer. You see, barring any specific learning difficulties, our minds can typically read faster than we speak. And as we read, many of us do what is called subvocalization, which is the articulation of each word we read in our mind. Ask yourself, when you read, do you silently pronounce or speak each word you see? Well, that might just be slowing down your reading. And the thing is, it can be very difficult for us to transition out of this habit, which is why I highly recommend pairing this reading habit with using a tracer, such as a pen or even your finger when you read. I personally love using this method, and I see the big difference it makes for me. When I'm reading a passage, it's very easy for my mind to wander or for my eyes to suddenly shift or check out other lines or words I shouldn't be reading. And that can be incredibly frustrating. Sometimes it feels like you have to reread what you read like 2 or 3 times, right? Well, tracing the words with our finger or a pencil as we read can simultaneously help us avoid this habit and reduce or eliminate subvocalization. You see, as we use a tracer, it may feel awkward at first, but what it is doing is forcing us not to read individual words or phrases, but instead to do something similar to what we do when we scan. Identify key phrases and themes, and then over time, our brain will simply do the rest in terms of making coherent meaning from it. This may take a while to practice, but you will definitely get better at it over time. Now that we've discussed 3 of the key speed reading techniques, let's learn how we can actually retain and remember what we're reading. The first of these 2 retention methods is to enter all notes into a system. Back when I was doing an immense amount of reading and research for my first academically published book, I had a pretty crude system for retaining information, but I will say, as crude as it was, it actually worked. As I read a book or article, I would keep a stack of post-it notes next to me and simply tear off a bit of the post-it note and stick it next to the important point I found. Typically, but not always, I would write a key insight on this post-it note or some sort of commentary about the information I found, and then later I would remove all the post-it notes from the pages of the book, create a Word document file on my computer dedicated to that specific book, and then I would type up each annotation I made on each post-it note, as well as the page number it was on so I could cite it later if needed. I read hundreds of books and articles in the process of writing my book, and so as you can imagine, this was extremely painstaking. You don't have to do what I did here, but the point is you need to have some sort of system for taking notes and then going back to retrieve the information. These days, I'm still reading about a book or 2 per week, as well as new studies and research almost daily, and so nowadays I use Notion, which is a free app you can download, and it's a much better solution for me to enter in notes while I'm reading and actually categorize those notes by book or topic. Also, I'm a big fan of short form, which conveniently summarizes books, articles, and podcasts along with insightful commentary and exercises you can do based on the contents of each book. And I often use their highlighting and note-taking features to organize my notes on a book. You can get a 20% discount on an annual membership by clicking on the link in the pinned comment below, so feel free to check that out. But here's the thing though, even if you do have all of these notes stored away somewhere, what's going to guarantee you actually review, use, and retain it all? Well, that's where the last of these 2 methods comes in. Make the information relevant. What do I mean by this? Well, without something to anchor our new knowledge to, it will slowly drift away upon the vast ocean of information in our lives. Have you ever asked yourself why some people seem to be such great speakers or get into a debate and seem to know the perfect answer to every point is because they're working with this information constantly. And it's usually in one of two ways. The first way is through discussion groups. Back when I was working on my book and also on my honors thesis, I was a regular attendee at my university's philosophy club meetings and history club meetings. I also made a point of regularly going to professors' office hours and having intellectual conversations with them, and I surrounded myself with friends who wanted to talk about the same topics I did. And so what was I doing? I was constantly not only reminding myself of the information I learned, but I was also actively synthesizing the information I learned with other concepts, arguments, or interesting points, thereby further developing the information and truly taking ownership of it. Doing things like this really solidifies the information in our minds. In other words, it makes it relevant. Ask yourself, who can you start associating with? What kinds of clubs or organizations can you join? Who do you know who likes the same topics as you? Can you start a weekly meeting with them to discuss it? This is really key. The second way to make information relevant is to apply the information we learn to a project. So you've made a bunch of notes, right? Well, now what are you going to apply those notes to? Well, this is exactly the genius behind a concept known as project-based learning. Research has shown that when we have some sort of complex end goal we want to achieve and that we are motivated by, our brain is more likely to store the information needed to achieve that goal into our long-term memory. By pursuing a project we genuinely want to pursue, we are stimulating the reward centers of our brain every time we build a skill or learn information relevant to that project, which then causes the neural connections associated with that information to strengthen. When I was in my undergrad, I actually enjoyed my majors and therefore wanted to complete essay assignments. And so the projects here were simply the curriculum. But outside of school, my most obvious independent project was my book on value theory, which, as I told you, I spent countless hours on. Now, my major project is YouTube. It literally gives me an excuse to read more, research consistently, and review my notes so I can make content every week. And the key to this is that I love it. I literally love sitting for hours researching for and writing a script every week. So then that's the thing. What project can you pursue that literally gives you energy like this and lights you up so much that you can't help but want to learn and remember? Truly think outside the box. A project can be anything. It could be a business you want to start. It could be a speech you want to write and deliver. It could be a new research study you want to publish, or it can even be something as simple as being a more interesting person to be around at parties. Whatever your project is, it's a must that you absolutely love it. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to make a massive impact, not only on your own life, but also in the lives of countless others, then be sure to watch this next video.